Hey everybody, thanks for joining our webinar today. My name is Joel Stoner. I'm the founder of Alter Media, and today we're talking about a full overview demo of Studio Suite 12, our studio and production management software. We've done a few other videos on Studio Suite 12 already, and we don't want to repeat what's already been covered. So I encourage you to please check out youtube.com/altermediaus. There's two videos in particular I highly recommend you watch. One is the deployment options, which is just under 4 minutes. And this is where we talk about the new hosting options, either on your local server, as we've always done, or on AWS or Azure or whatever. And also that now the browser can be the primary method of access to Studio Suite instead of FileMaker Pro. So that's a short video, but has a lot of really good, important information in it. So please check that out. Also, for our existing users, there is a preview webinar that we did a few months ago that covers a lot of what is new in Studio Suite 12. And so I ask you to watch that. Today's webinar is going to assume you're new to the Studio Suite platform, so we're going to kind of start from the beginning. But that one will be good, where you can see that we talk about how this is a ground-up rebuild of Studio Suite into a single file, which makes it so much better, faster, and simpler underneath the hood and also on top. All new simplified interface. Reduced the plugins down to 2 instead of 6, and got rid of the requirement for Java 6. And also now Studio Suite Lite, that we formerly called Web Glancer, now allows editing, which is great. There's actually a whole lot more that's new, but please check out that preview webinar video for all the details on that. Also, all the change that I just described radically changed the way people are going to use Studio Suite from here forward for the better. And we really mean that. This is by far the most significant update in the history of Studio Suite. It really is. We think it's a game changer, and we hope you think so too. Now, for those that are new to the platform, let me talk briefly about what Studio Suite is. I'm going to bring out one of our old slides, so sorry if some of you have seen this before. But we like to think of the workflow is your data flow. And this is pretty common across all kinds of media production. Pretty much everything starts out with contacts. You've got clients, prospects, vendors, staff, emails you need to track, job history, communications with everybody, and maybe client-specific rates. You may also have a number of rooms or studios or stages or edit suites. You might want to keep track of where your AC outlets are, have some pictures there, the different rates, what equipment's installed where, track your equipment maintenance or room maintenance. Speaking of equipment, a really nice equipment inventory module with barcodes, tracking equipment maintenance. Again, packages, depreciation, rates, usage history of each item, revenue, different collections and pools of equipment. We'll talk about that. And then there's non-physical things, services like editing, colorization, rotoscoping, compositing, all that stuff. So you can define those as well as packages and the rates that go along with them and any budget codes. And then we mentioned rates. It can come in hourly, daily, weekly, flat rate, project rate, client-specific rates, rental style rates. Each rate can track budget codes, account codes, profit loss, and market rate. And all of that can flow into budgets. We ship with the AICE and AICP budget templates that you can use. You can also build your own or export those out to Excel. And all that flows up into projects, which has a kind of a hierarchical build, starting with productions and then projects and project groups. In each project, you can have multiple resources, of course. Budgets, actuals, track your profit loss, check in and out of different pieces of equipment, manage your discounts, notifications, conflict notification. And of course, we want all that stuff to appear in a calendar in daily, week view, month view, Gantt view, agenda views, tracking all of our events, our projects, our tasks, our employee schedules. And we'd like to be able to sync that to Google or iCal or Outlook. And of course, the purpose of all of this is to produce content. So with Studio Suite, you can track your digital assets, your physical assets, I should say digital media assets, physical media assets, electronic delivery of those, barcodes, check in, check out, who's got when, where, what, status of each item, release history, labels, all that stuff. And the other big point, of course, is to make some money. So there's an invoicing module with full reporting, exports out to QuickBooks and other accounting software. email PDF invoices, track your discounts, late fees, commissions, etc. So all of that stuff is the workflow of Studio Suite and media production in general, and so we like to call that the data flow as well. So I want to also show another old slide, which is our module structure, which is useful to people new to the platform. At the highest level, we've got something called a production, and that equates to the season of a TV show, a feature film, any kind of large multi-phase project. And of course, you can have a bunch of productions going on at once or over time. Within each production, you can have one or more projects. Project would equate to the episode of a TV show, one large aspect of a film like pre-production or shooting or editing or mixing or a reel of film, for example, any kind of one-off job. And of course, each production can have multiple projects within it, and projects can also stand alone by themselves. A lot of people call projects work orders, so they're kind of one and the same. A project is a work order is a project. Within each project, you can have one or more events, and an event essentially equates to resources. So when you've got some of your rooms, some of your equipment, some of your contacts, some of your services, and some of your media inventory or materials, or now we call them expendables, and we combine those with one or more rates I talked about earlier. So we can have hourly rates, daily rates, weekly rates, client-specific rates assigned to multiple rooms, multiple equipment, multiple people, and so on. When we combine those with a date and a time and a rate, that's what we call an event. So, Studio A at 10 o'clock on Monday for $100 an hour or whatever, that equals an event. Those, of course, flow out to the calendar, which we can synchronize to Google or iCal or Outlook calendar, also visible on your phones. And those all flow out to an invoice, which can then further flow out to any third-party accounting software. And as we mentioned, the purpose of all of this is to create media content. So we've got a library module that links all of those physical and digital media assets to a production, project, or event. And then there's also tasks, which are kind of like lightweight events. Somebody's got to do something by a certain date and time. That's a task. And all of that flows back to the client in the contacts module. And so this is kind of, a mental mind map of how the whole thing works. So let's take a look, shall we? Usually when I do these webinars, I do all of it in FileMaker Pro as the desktop application. Kind of the big game changer with Studio Suite 12 is you can really use the browser for probably 90% of the work that you can do. And so we're doing that here. And another note, it used to be that we really depended on your server being pretty close to your, either in your building or pretty close to be able to do that. I'm in Burbank, California. The server that I'm connected to is in Portland, Oregon on AWS. And so we're going to see the effect of some of the kind of deep underlying changes in Studio Suite in terms of the how it's built and how it's going to be a whole lot faster than it used to be. So I'm logged in, of course, to my Studio Suite here. Over on the left side are all the different modules that I have access to as a user. Which modules I have access to is governed by two things. One is security. So if I'm a lower level user and I don't have access to, say, the invoice module or rates or something like that, those would simply disappear from my interface and I wouldn't know that they were there. I can also control those as a user. For example, if I don't, care about purchase orders or petty cash or something, I can turn those off, and those have now disappeared from my interface as well. So two levels of control over those kind of things. I'm going to turn them back on so that we've got those. You also see that some of the modules have indicators. I can see I've got 6 invoices overdue, 2 pieces of equipment that are overdue. Good to see that right from the front. And then this section here is the different projects that are going on today. As I hover over those, I can see that's highlighted, so I can go right to it. If I want to jump right to them, it's going to bring me right into that project called Walter Goes Wide. And I can get back, I can navigate in a couple different ways. For now, I'm just going to hit the back button to get me back to the home screen. Now, if I want to add myself to a project, it's easy enough. I just hit the plus me button over here, and that's going to bring up a new item where I can edit any kind of time that I want to. Let's say I came in early. I'm going to leave, I don't know, around 4 o'clock on this. I want to drop in some notes about what I did. I could also adjust the status here. Let's say that I know that I actually just finished this, so I'm going to put this in. I'll leave it as confirmed. So I'll save that. And so I've just now added myself as an item to that project. Super easy. You used to have to, dive around into projects and see all that stuff. Within each project, if I jump to one of those, we're going to see all the line items that are in those projects, and this is what we call events. If you remember, I talked about that a moment ago. Different resources at dates, times, at certain rates. Those are what we call an event. And all of today's events also show up on the right side of the screen. And as I hover over these, I'm going to see a little bit more detail, and I can jump into one of them as well. So if I want to say that Studio B for Walter Goes Wide is now confirmed, I can make that change here. It's going to turn green, hit save, and then we're back, and we're going to see now that Studio B is green. Everybody can see that. At the bottom are all of my tasks, I should say. So prepare for the webinar. I created that last night as I was preparing. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to say that that is now complete. Although I would always like to be a little bit more prepared. But for now, let's call it complete. So now that's changed. Do the webinar. That's actually happening right now, so I'm going to change the status of that to in progress. So hit OK on that. So now anybody that's looking at tasks knows that that is done. And also my tasks that are complete disappear. So the one that I said prepare is hidden because it's done. I can see at the bottom right that I've also got some follow-up calls. I need to call up Andy here to talk about that next project. And if I'm going to do that right now, I'm going to say I did, and it went really well. And I'm going to convert that to a call. And so now that follow-up has disappeared. So there's common everyday things that you do as a user of Studio Suite have gotten a lot simpler and a lot faster to do. I can jump right to projects. I can add myself to a project. I can adjust any project I'm on. I can manage my tasks. I can create a new task. And I can also manage my phone call follow-ups. So now when we talked about projects and resources, let's talk a little bit about where those come from. I mentioned they kind of start at the people area, so let's go into contacts. Here's our list view. All the list views throughout Studio Suite, you can sort them by the headers, as you would probably expect. Contacts in particular, we've got a field here that we can manage select different kinds of data that we might want to view. The search is in everything, so if I want to look for myself, I'm always trying to find myself. Here's the detail of my contact record. Each contact can be a client and a vendor and an employee. Sometimes that happens in this industry. Obviously, name, address, phone number, URLs, email addresses here. And we can also set up titles and positions. So if I'm an engineer, I can just type that in. Could also select it from a menu, and can also do things like shift selecting to grab more than one item in there as well. So let me do that. Or I can also type in this way. All right, so now I'm saying that I've got two different functions. And because I'm a resource over here, it's asking me if I want to change that on any existing events, add myself in those different titles or positions to existing bookings, and I'm saying no, I don't want to do that. If I want to create a new user, I just hit the new button at the top. At the top of the window of every window is what we call the function bar. So this is how we create a new record, by hitting the plus button. The duplicate will duplicate the current record. If we want to delete a record, we hit the trash can. If we want to go into find mode, we click this button. And once we go into find mode, you can see I've got 2 records out of 18. If I hit this find all button, it's going to show me all 18 out of 18 records. And then if I want to omit certain records, maybe I'm filtering through my list of contacts, people I want to call or something like that, I can just hit this omit button, and you can see this found set is slowly reducing as I do that. And then there's always a sort. Again, I can sort in any of the list views, but if I want to get particular and sort by some other particular field like country or something like that, I could do that here if I need to. Now I just created a new record, so I'm going to get to the actually do find all, and let me go to the very end. And I think I created, I can't remember if I typed the guy's name in. I did not, so let's call him Bob. Bob Engineer, Editor. We have Eddie Editor, and so we'll add Bob Editor as well. I'm going to give him a title position of Editor. And I'm going to make him a resource. Whenever I make something a resource, I can choose what category it's going to be a resource in. And of course, you can create as many different categories as you like. Out of the box, we just typically leave people as contacts, as a contact. So actually, Bob is not a piece of equipment. So let me go up and try to get him to be a contact. Oh, what I'm looking for is people. So I'll do make resource, and then it's going to ask me if I want it to be in the calendar. I'll say sure. Now I've just created a resource named Bob Editor, and he is in the calendar. We'll see that in a minute. While I'm in contacts, let me just take a quick tour through the rest of it. So more info is going to show us the different projects that this guy has been involved with, either as a client or as a participant or as a talent, and I can jump to any one of those. And for this, actually, I'm going to go to my list view and get to a record that's got more data in it. Let's go to Edit Editor. More info. The more info tab here is underlined, indicating that there's stuff there. And the web viewer tab is neat. This is going to show us kind of an instant search on a number of different websites that we need to get to. When you're using FileMaker Pro as your client, we show that right within the window. When we're using it in a browser, we actually need to open that up as a separate window. So if I want to do a Google map search for Edit Editor, it opens it up in a new window there so we can see where he lives. Excuse me. Within contacts, there's a whole employee management section, including this is where we would define rates for this person. And the next tab over is the financial tab. This is where we can see if this guy is a client, all of the details about any existing invoices that we may have sent him. Let me go to all here and either. And here would be a list of all of the invoices that we've sent James Johnson. Of course, we can jump to any one of these to get right into that invoice. Also, client-specific rates are available here. And all of the physical or digital media assets that are related to him are accessible here. We can jump right to that in the library module. I'm going to cover the attach tab. Maybe I've got a document that's related to this guy. I'm going to hit the plus button, and I can bring in a document from my desktop or a folder, or I can link a URL if it's his website, or bring in a file via FTP, or link it from Dropbox, Box, or Google Docs. So we're bringing in all of these documents to you. I'm going to hit File. I'm going to hit Choose File, and then let's see. I'm going to just what do I got here? Let me go to, this is the kind of thing I never prepare enough for. So I'm just going to grab a random file here. Let's call it a JSON tester. So now that file is going to be uploaded to the Studio Suite server, and we've got access to it over here. And from over here, I'm going to be able to manage the access status. Who should have access to this particular file. If I wanted to download this file, I would click on it and it would come down to my desktop or anybody else's desktop that wants to click on it. So that's how you can link files to certain records in Studio Suite and control who's got access to them. Every module also has a reports tab, and this is where you're going to find the kind of printouts you'd expect to see from the module you're in. Since we're in contacts, we've got things like company lists, mailing labels, holiday lists, holiday envelopes, regular envelopes, as well as client statements. And there's also an audit log in Studio Suite. And this is going to track all of the changes that get made to the record over time. So we can see here on this particular date and time, Joel, that's me, changed the company selector record from Clean Cuts Music to Planet Perfect Productions. And that's great not only for accountability of, hey, why did you change that? Or and also, who, so you know who made those changes. But let me go back to our new guy named Bob, so I can search for him up here. There's Bob, and I'm going to create a rate for him. Go to Rates, hit the plus button, create a new rate. And I can either create it as a regular rate or a credit rate. Let's call it a regular. And we'll call it hourly. Rates are optional, but I think it's a good idea to have them for all of your resources. Within the rate, we can determine what the unit of measure is. The default is hours. So let's say whenever Bob is editing for something, we're going to charge our client, I don't know, $100 an hour for that, and we have to pay him $50 an hour. That's going to show our profit margin to be $50 an hour or 100%. And then a lot of our corporate customers like this feature. We could say that, out in the real world, we'd have to pay an editor $250 an hour. These are fake numbers. Don't ever quote me on these. To do this particular work, and therefore we're saving our corporate company $150 an hour by doing it internally. We can set up overtime rates, and once we've done that, double overtime rates would appear here. And in the upper right, this is where we can enter in any kind of hooks to external accounting software, such as QuickBooks or Xero or anything else that you're using. So when we create an invoice that has Bob, the editor, at the hourly rate, it's going to go over to that accounting software with these parameters here under the item type of service, the item name of Bob, and the account of service. There's other features here in rates I'm going to skip over for now, so I'm just going to hit continue. And just real quickly, with less talking, I'm going to create a daily rate for Bob, call it regular, daily. Change the unit of measure to day, and I don't know, $100, $1,000 a day. And we have to pay him $250, let's say, a day. Market rate, 2,000. Something like that. Do the overtime, do my external accounting details, and we'll hit continue. So now Bob has two rates, hourly and daily. And then over here, I can choose which is the default rate, if I want to make it be the hourly rate or the daily rate. So let's leave the hourly rate as the default. And then any project, I can select, do I want the hourly or the daily for that particular project. So now we've got a resource named Bob who's showing up in the calendar, and we can book into projects. Let's go to Rooms. This is another resource that you might have. Here are ones that we've got in there already. Let's create a new room. Let's call it Webinar Room. And let's say that it's in building number 1. And let's call this an edit suite. And I'm going to make it a resource. And I want it to appear in the calendar. That's all there is to it. Within Rooms, we can document, room dimensions, phone outlets, AC outlets, breakers, and so on, any kind of notes. We want to create a rate for this as well. Do this very quickly, create a new rate. I'll call it a regular. And let's say this is also hourly. And call it $100 an hour. And I think that it costs us, $8 an hour in terms of rent or electricity or something like that. And all of our competitors are charging $150. And when we want to export this out to QuickBooks, we want it to show up this way as a service. Done. That's all we have to do. And so I can also add existing rates. So maybe I've got some other rates that I want to be accessible when I do that. So I'm going to use the Studio A daily rate. So now my new webinar room, I can choose from a number of different rates when I book it. Now within each room, we can view a bunch of equipment that's installed. So I'm going to jump back to a room that I've already created, our Studio A, and I'm going to go look at this particular camera. Now I'm in my equipment inventory module, looking at the details of my Arri Alexa camera. I can see which of my internal companies owns it. I haven't really covered this yet. It's more of a setup feature that we're going to circle back to. But I've defined 2 companies in my Studio Suite, Planet Perfect Productions and Planet Perfect Rentals. So this is owned by our internal rental company. I could also, by the way, put in equipment that's owned by other companies if I need to use it on a regular basis. So barcode, purchase date, weight, origin. This is great if you need to ship it out of the country. Warranty expiration. Here we're looking at all the financial information about this item. What we paid, what it's worth, any earnings. Do we lease it? Are we owning it? And a summary of all of the maintenance hours, labor, and parts it's taken to keep this thing working. We also have a depreciation schedule over here. And on the package tab, this is where we can manage what items come with this camera all the time whenever I book it. And so I've got a lens and a riser stand there. If I want to add something else, I hit the plus button, and let's go ahead and add this that thing right there. I can add a couple different items. Maybe that's an odd mic, but let's say we're going to add that mic to it as well. So now whenever I book this camera, these 4 items are going to come along with it. There is also the notion of collections, which I'm not going to talk about in this webinar, but just very briefly, if you have, say, 10 cameras and they're all the same make, model, number, you would make a collection out of them. And what that allows you to do is book the kind of generic placeholder collection when at the time of booking, because you don't care at that point which of those 10 cameras you're using. You just know you need 3 of them. So today I'm going to book 3 for a project next week. And then on the day of the project, I would check out the actual 3 cameras that I'm using. They would apply themselves or subtract themselves for the collection for that period. And then you would want to check those exact 3 back in. So we're going to do another webinar later on more details on that. But just know in the short term that when you've got large numbers of items, Studio Suite makes it easy to track those as well. Other miscellaneous information about this camera. And then just like we did for people and equipment, we have rates for these things as well. I think you know how that works by now. I'm going to go take a look at the event history of each item. So because equipment moves around a lot, we want to be able to see, what projects it's been used on, what the status of those was, the total revenue that's been generated by using this piece of equipment minus the cost, and that's our theoretical earnings, and also the total hours that this item has been used. And apart from the actual usage of this piece of equipment, we've got something called Scan Manager. So here I could type in Joel is going to be using an item called, I think, 111111. Crossing my fingers. Oh yeah, I've got to put in where it is, edit 1. And it's going to go ahead and say it found that item, this Avalon mic preamp, and it's going to say that Joel said it was here in the edit 1 location on this certain date and time, and we can put in any comments. And this is really just to put a date time stamp on the presence of a piece of equipment. And then this is going to allow you to do searches later on all the equipment that has been scanned ever, or not scanned ever, or scanned since a certain date, or not scanned since a certain date. Great way to keep track of your equipment. Last time it was seen, where it was, all that. Maintenance history allows you to keep track of the different repairs that have been made to your equipment over time. The Attach tab, the documents, we talked about this, so you maybe want to put in a PDF user guide or a purchase receipt, schematics, or anything like that relative to each piece of equipment. Similar to what we had in contacts, we've got quick links to the websites for the different places you might go relative to this piece of equipment. So just did an instant search there in Google, for example. Maybe I want to go to eBay, find out what everybody else is buying and selling this item for. Just saves you some typing. Don't have to do that. And reports, just like we had in contacts. Show me equipment lists for my clients, another version for insurance, and so on. Okay, so we talked about resources of rooms, equipment, and people. There's other kinds of services I mentioned early on. Let's do find all. AICE, these different things like rough cuts, backup, restore, storyboards, graphics, digital editing, all the stuff that you might do. A lot of it is pre-entered within these budget templates. You can either use these or delete them or create your own, modify these, whatever you like, but they're all there for you. And this is also where you would be able to put in your own new service. Let's call it in the category of services. Obviously, this drop-down menu of categories is adjustable. I'm going to make an item called breakfast. Let's say we need to provide breakfast for everybody on the team. So now we've got that available, and I could set up a rate for that as well. While I'm on the screen, let me also mention I can manage what we call also books here. So if whenever I book breakfast, we want Alan Assistant to come along as our resource. So anyway, that's how you can manage all of your resources. I can go in and adjust any of them that I want to. The next thing we want to look at is projects. This is where we're going to obviously manage our projects. Here's a list of all of them. We can jump right into any particular one. Here's that Walter Goes Wide one that we saw from the home screen. And just a side note, for those of you that have been using Studio Suite for a while, I hope you're noticing that our speed here is really good. That the server is almost 1,000 miles away, and everything seems to be flying along pretty quickly, if I may say so myself. So let's create a new project. So I hit the new button here. I could also do it from a template. So I'll just do a new project in this case. I'll call it webinar project. I can optionally select a client. We used to require it. Now it's optional. So I'm going to now just choose a client here. Let's call it the Rose Company. And here I am on a blank project. I default to the actual charge view, but it's also going to show me a list of my most recently used project views. And when I talk about these project views, there's so many facets or parameters of a project that it's impossible to see them all in one view. So we have this view selector. It's divided up into 3 columns: budget, actual, and difference. We'll start at the actual. So this is where we're managing charges. Tax and discount is where you would obviously manage your tax and discounts relative to that. Here is where we would manage any expenses and the profit loss relative to that. And so I'm going to leave it at that for now. Let's create some data so we've got something to look at. So I'm going to go add items. And then this is going to bring up a list of all of our resources, including the ones that we created. It's also going to show us which ones are already booked today. So we're booking all of this stuff today. I can adjust these to tomorrow or the next day, and we can see that those conflict notifications have gone away. So I created a guy named Bob over in Contacts. There's Bob, the editor. So I want to book him on Friday. And I think I also created a room. Let me go to the rooms module, and I'm going to be able to see all the rooms that we created, including the webinar room that we talked about earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and book that. Maybe we also want to get some equipment on my project. So I'm going to go ahead. Looks like my cameras, that one camera is booked. I'm going to go ahead and book it. It's going to create a conflict that'll be useful to show how that works. And by the way, here is a collection, that Canon C100 camera. It's showing me that I own 4 of them, and 4 of them are available. So maybe I want to go ahead and get 2 of those. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll talk about how collections work. So let me add those to the project. I could also optionally add to the project without dates because sometimes you don't know when this stuff is going to occur, and you just need to put that together. So I'll go add to project, and we're going to see that number of items. Of course, it's showing me the conflict for the items that I selected. Get added in. That was also pretty quick. So here's all the different resources that we just selected. It's showing us the conflicts. It's also dropped in the default rates for all these items. And if we want to look at some different rate options here, you can see that it dropped in Bob's hourly rate at $100 an hour. I could also say, you know what, for this one, I want to go to the daily rate, and that's changed it now to $1,000 for the day. And if I want to adjust that, I can just click on it, and we'll say, you know what, for this one, let's do 800 a day. And let's say also Bob gave us a deal because this is a budget project. He agreed to do it for 200 a day. I'm not saying that these are normal rates. I'm just coming up with random numbers. So that's, of course, going to recalculate everything. And then for the webinar room, I want to change this maybe to a daily rate as well. So I'll click on that, go to any of the other options. Whenever I'm selecting rates, by the way, I can narrow the list of rate options down to the category. So if I filter this, this is going to show me maybe the Studio C hourly rate that we've got. So now whenever I override a time or a price, it's going to show up in blue, which shows me that somebody has changed those from the default. And if I hover over the trash can, it's going to show me who did it. So on November 2nd at 1:36, Joel changed the price from $1,000 to $800. Hope you can see that. If I want to drop a note onto any one of these, I have the little pencil icon, and we say, hi there. So let's see, webinar room, Bob editor. I think I put all those in the calendar. Let's go look at our expenses. Let's see how this is shaping up here. So, well, here's tax and discount. If I want to manage that, I'm going to breeze over to that for now, just because we're getting low on time. Let's look at our expenses. So here's how much everything is costing us. If I want to view that, here's my total expense, $606. If I want to look at my profit loss, this is where I can view my total charges, my total expenses, my total profit loss, and view down here. So we're charging $10,650. Our expense is $606. We're profiting $10,044 or 94.31% margin. And if we charged our market rates for this, this would have cost our client $15,600, which is a savings of $49.50. So that's not bad. Let's see. Let's go over to tasks. Tasks we can create by hitting the plus button from within this project. I'm just going to kind of be random about that. I can set up a due date. Let's say Monday. I need a due time. Let's call it 1 p.m. And I can assign this to one or more people. So if I go Andy Engineer, and let's assign it to me also. And then I could also assign it to a whole group of people, maybe all of our camera operators. So that plopped all of those people in, except that guy named Cam Era. He's actually not that good, so let's get rid of him. So I'll hit save. So now this task has just magically appeared for those users on their main menu, of course, within this project, also on their phone, also in the calendar module, also in the tasks module. If that's not enough, we can also send them an email notification. And so now this has just sent an email to those folks about this task. And if there's any changes to this task in terms of status or somebody being added or deleted or the text of it changing, that will resend another email to those folks automatically. If that's not enough, we can also set up notifications. So here is a description of everybody that's on this. Maybe I want to add in, please do this, please do that, blah, 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 make it better this time. So I can send this task out notification out right now. Maybe I also want a reminder to go out, an hour before it's due, and maybe a day before it's due. And I can also control, who's going to get these notifications. So I want Andy, and I want Eddie, and I can also send it out via email. So this is the emails of the people that are already on it. As soon as I hit OK, boom, everybody's just been notified, and they're going to get that drip sequence of reminders. Now we can also create task groups. Oftentimes it's not just one thing that needs to get done, it's a bunch of things. So we've got kind of a sample here called runners responsibilities, straighten the studios, stock it with papers and fruit. One called prep budget, where we gather the details, assemble line items, all of that stuff. And so we can create new groups here, add new items to that group by hitting the plus button. So I'm going to close that up and just show you that over here, if I select one of my task groups, let's say prep a budget, I'll load that. And now it's going to drop in all of those tasks for all of that. We can also set up on those default task groups the people that are assigned to them by default. Talent is where we can keep track of all the talent that are on a project, and I'm going to move a little faster just because we're running out of time and I want to get to questions. This is the call sheet where we can manage all of the people that are on there. Setup information, client information. Let's look at media assets. This is where we can track all the physical or digital media assets. I'm going to hit the plus button. Let's say that a camera operator walked in the door with 2 SD cards, just pulled off his camera. So we'll call that SD1. Notice it's inherited the client and project information, also set up a library number and a barcode, which we can have automatically be created based on the library number. And I can also say that we're moving those into Edit 2 or the webinar room that we created a bit ago, because we're going to get to work on that. So I'm going to hit done. Now it's asking me to name the second one. I'll call it SD2, and I'll hit done on that. And so now I'm in the library module looking at 2 media assets. So now we are here, and let's look at titles. If this were an older kind of media that we needed to create a label for, we could put in different titles or cuts or clips or cues or spots or scenes or segments or shots or anything like that. And just by doing that, we have already created labels for all of the different media assets, media formats, I should say, for that. So here's all of the client and project information, all the titles, our logo, barcode, and all that stuff all ready to go. Also 2x4 labels, a couple different media formats. Oh, one important thing. All of the screens in Printouts in Studio Suite are entirely user customizable. So if you don't like the look of this, for example, you can change it. You can change the fonts, the colors, the positions, and all of that is accessible when you are accessing your Studio Suite via FileMaker Pro. Speaking of FileMaker, let's take a look at that. So here is the same instance of Studio Suite and I've got it running. You can see here at the top in FileMaker Pro, and I'm logged in as a different user just to prevent any collisions. But what I want to do now is go to, let's go to the library module, because I want to show you one particular feature that's actually not accessible in the browser, and that's the disk log feature. So we created these reels over, maybe we're in, I don't know, Nebraska over here in our browser, and maybe over here in LA. We're looking at some of these media assets, and I've got the hard drive or the SD card with me. So I'm on the disk log tab, and I want to point it to a particular folder and specify what kind of metadata I want it to capture, maybe time codes, and I'll hit OK. And it's going to ask me to locate a particular folder. Let's see, demo files. This is what I'm looking for. Okay, it's on my desktop. I'm going to grab this old Final Cut Pro folder. I'm going to select that. And what it's going to do is basically take a snapshot of all the files and folders that are in that folder. And then that's going to be a searchable archive. We're not actually ingesting the content of that. We're just logging all of the file names, the modification dates, times, and sizes, and the metadata that we asked for. So I asked for time code. So there's all the time codes, creation, modification times, file sizes, and all that stuff. So having done that in FileMaker Pro on the desktop, and again, I'm in Burbank. Our server is in Portland, almost 1,000 miles away. You can see that the performance over here on the desktop is pretty good. But now that I've got that, I can, over here, I'm back in, let's say, Nebraska. Here's all those files that I can search for if I need to from there. So I'm going to jump back into the project, and I don't know, let's look at the calendar. We haven't done that yet. Let me hide this. So back to my browser, I'm going to go to calendar, and we'll do kind of the same process again, creating a project from within the calendar. So I think I created some bookings. I can't remember where I did it. Webinar project, there it is right there. So let's talk about calendar for a little bit. So we're in a week view, what we call timeline view. We've got a day view. Here's a week view. Here's a month view. I like the week view best. And we can also see that Bob, the editor, and our webinar room that we created earlier are just magically appearing in the calendar. We can see our daily notes here as well. And in addition to showing these resources, it's also showing in this green section the different projects that we've got going on currently. You know, sometimes you're thinking about resources and when is Eddie available. Other times you're thinking, you know, how long is this Walter Goes Wide project going to last? Looks like it's over today. If I wanted, of course, I could drag this out. You know, maybe we got to do more edits or mixing tomorrow on this project. But here I can see that we're extending it tomorrow, but I don't have any resources booked on it. That's good to know. And also maybe Bob just called me up and he's sick, and so I'm going to now have Eddie Editor do this project. So any kind of changes that we make over here in Calendar, of course, get reflected back into Studio Suite. And let's say, for example, that Eddie said, you know, I can do it, but I can't start until 10 o'clock. So we can go ahead and make those changes from here as well. Let's see, let me get back. So we can also add tasks and employee schedules to the calendar. So if I scroll down a little further now, I'm going to see kind of a tan section, and this is going to show all of our staffers. Now, up here in the resource area, this is where we manage people for projects. You know, you're going to start at 2 and end at 4 on this particular project, and we can see, for example, Joel here is got 2 events going on that particular day, from 8 to 4, and then again from 6 to 7. So down here, this would be the 9 to 5 hours that people come in every day to work, and we'd also be able to see and create any tasks for people. So maybe I want to create a task for Eddie Editor. So I'm going to say create task. Okay. Reminder to come in for Bob. Just go ahead and save that. So let's go to next week and create a session. So let's book our webinar room on Monday and Tuesday. Let's have Bob the editor. Hopefully he's feeling better then. And let's get Andy Engineer to join in. One thing I didn't mention yet is presets. So over here, these are kind of my default things that I've got. Actually, no, that's my people preset with a room in it. So let me go to my typical all preset. And here I'm going to see a couple of my different rooms and some of my other people and some other services that we do called storyboarding and so on like that. And I'm going to also pick, maybe I need Andy Engineer next week to do a mix or something. Anyway, point is I'm grabbing a bunch of different items over different periods. And what I want to do now is book them as a project. So oddly enough, I hit the book project button. I have the option here to create a new project or add it to an existing one. I can also specify that I do want to choose a client or not. So we're trying to make it as quick as possible. So I just go proceed. And this is going to go ahead and create the project for me with all of those items, all the times that I selected, all the resources. It's also going to drop in all the default prices. Keep in mind, again, I'm 1,000 miles away from the server. And here it is. Here is all the stuff that I selected. It's dropped in the default prices, and I got a total right here. $3,600. Now I want to, let's say, email this out to our client for an approval. So I'll hit, show prices, yes. So here it has created a PDF of our work order. It's auto-assigned it to the client. Their email address is ea@ea.com. Of course, I could put in anybody else's there that I wanted to. And drop in some notes. Here is the quote that we just talked about on the phone. Please let me know what you think. And so I'll hit send, and that's going to fire it off directly, and that person will receive it. It's also going to link it back to their contacts module, so we're going to be able to see that. One thing that bypassed actually was the printout itself, so let's take a look at that. Again, keeping in mind that all the screens and printouts are user customizable when accessing via FileMaker Pro. So here is the default kind of work order printout with all the resources on it. This one is showing the prices. When you're doing it for your staff, your crew, whatever, you'd probably do the version without prices. So this is actually a new, important new feature in SUSE Suite 12 is we can print and create PDFs from the browser, and then of course you can print them from here, download it as a PDF, email it from there as well. Otherwise, we can just close it up, and there we are. The next thing I might need to do is make an invoice. So what do? I hit the Not Invoiced button. I'll do Select All for Invoice. And I don't know if you saw it, but what it did is it just went and checked the checkbox for all of these different items here. So I'm going to close this for a minute. Maybe I don't want to invoice for Joe Producer because he didn't show up or he's free or included. And again, I want to remind that we can always override these prices. We're going to do this for $90 an hour. Our expense went up on this to a whopping $10 an hour. And maybe we actually had to pay him for 9 hours, even though we're charging 8 hours. And so this is automatically going to show us also our profit loss. Right there, 630 on that. So good to know as we do that. So I've chosen which items I want to invoice, and now I click again on Not Invoiced, and I'm going to say Invoice Selected Items. And oh yeah, I've got to have a client before I can make an invoice. So specify a client. Pop-up list. I can type a couple letters here. So let me type FAIR. So let's get the guy at Fairly Good Engineering. Now we have a client, and now we can finally make an invoice. Select all for invoice. Oh, I did that already. Deselect this. Invoice selected items. Let's call this a final invoice. So it's going to clone all of those items and bring them over to a new invoice. And from here, we've got basically the same features. I could print it out or email it. I'll go ahead and print so we can see what this looks like. And here we are on the Planet Perfect Productions invoice with all those line items, everything there ready to go. And I can just close that out. The next thing I want to show you very quickly, actually, is I'm going to jump back to our client, and I want to show you how all of this stuff is linked back to their record. So Andy Engineer ended up being the client on that one. I'm going to go to More Info. Here is the project that I thought we put a name to. Maybe we didn't. Let's go take a look at that. So now we're in that project. Yeah, I guess we never named that project, which is optional. So I'm going to go back to the client again. And if I go to More Info, Financial, we're going to see the invoice that we just created on the project with no name. And then I'm realizing that the media assets that I created was actually for a different project with a different client, so we're not going to see them here. A couple other important things to show you before we wrap up. One is the web glancer, which is now called Studio Suite Lite. I'm logged into it. And so this is the kind of lightweight responsive web application. It works great on a desktop. It also really works great on a phone or tablet as well. So you notice as I resize this, it repositions everything and lets us do everything. One of the big new things in this version of Web Glancer is it's allowing us to edit things. So here I am, I'm Joel, it's showing me my events today. I can go ahead and click on this. I can make any adjustments to it from my phone or from home or wherever. I could drop in some notes. Maybe I want to say that I've now completed this. And of course, the changes that I specify here are going to get relayed back into Studio Suite. This module's really come along. I can see my tasks here. I can do a quick log if somebody says, "Hey Joel, will you please add yourself?" Oh, I got to log back in. Okay, so those changes might not have occurred because it was just kind of running in memory there. Let's say never. Quick log. What I want to do is somebody walked by me in the hallway and they say, "Hey, will you just do a quick remix on that 30-second Howdy project?" So sure, let's type my name here. There I am, Joel Stoner. It's going to add me in there. I can select whatever times that I'm working. And let's go ahead and submit that. So now this line item has been added to the project over in Studio Suite called Howdy. We can also, by the way, view the calendar from here as well. It might be helpful if I make it so I can read. So let's go take a look at calendar. So here's the calendar. Here's all the stuff that we've booked. Not too shabby. And let's see what else. So that's the Studio Suite Lite. And we are actually just coming up on the end of the show. Let me see if I can think of anything else. Oh, I know, one really good thing. Let's talk about the Google Sync. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have a two-way sync to the Google Calendar and iCal. And honestly, I can't remember which items I created here, but any of the items that we booked, here we go. So here's the Howdy project that I created a bit ago. I can adjust these within my Google Calendar if I need to, along with my tasks, so I can move these around. And this is going to get reflected back into Studio Suite. So with that, I think what I'm going to do is go back to here and say thank you. You can always sign up for a trial at studiosuite.com. If you have any questions about Studio Suite, please feel free to give a ring, 800-450-5740 or sales@studiosuite.com. Thank you all so much for joining. We look forward to hearing from you. Let us know if you have any questions. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.